So, today on the podcast, we'll finish up our series on the Disney mini parks. And today's story about the regional installations of the 1990s is going to take a little bit to set up, as it underscores a large shift in the identity of the Disney company, an identity shift related to these regional offerings. So settle in for the next few minutes as we put all of this into context, and for that we're going to need some setup music. In the 1990s, as the Disney parks continued to expand into international markets such as Europe and then Hong Kong, with the company starting some preliminary negotiations for a park eventually in China, Disney again started to explore ways to expand the footprint of its experiences in North America, which is generally where a few weeks ago this whole series started. But in the 1990s and early 2000s, Disney wasn't looking to create mini parks in North America, which was the plan that decades earlier Walt had explored, but rather to take design elements from its parks and position them in regional venues such as play centers, massive arcades, restaurants, and large retail stores. During this same period, CEO Michael Eisner began to remake the Disney company's ideological image, a shift that would reimagine what it meant to be a Disney fan. Before the mid-1990s, a Disney fan might be described as someone who watched Disney movies either at the theater or on VHS, perhaps subscribed to the Disney Channel, and occasionally visited a Disney park. Before the early 1980s, neither Disneyland nor Disney World had annual passes, so guests needed a day ticket to enter any of the parks. A large number of locals regularly hanging out in the parks wasn't financially affordable. Even when annual passes were introduced, they took years to catch on. During the initial rollout at Disneyland, they were only offered to members of the Magic Kingdom Club, which offered discounts through various company resource departments, including those of the California state government, who partnered with Disney for various deals and unique ticket options. But in the 1990s, Disney started to think of itself more as a lifestyle brand than as an entertainment company. That is, executives began to reimagine how fans might engage these products and experiences the company had to offer. Or to put this another way, if you were born, let's say before 1985, during your formative years, you likely understood the Disney company to be primarily an entertainment company. If your first connection to Disney was made during these years, you likely once saw Disney as a company focused on films and theme parks, with some consumer goods focused on the Disney characters and on park icons such as the castle. There's a good chance that even now, the parks and movies are central to how you connect with what the company has to offer. However, if you were born after 1985, you probably have a very different understanding of what the Disney company is and how you connect to it, as opposed to fans who are slightly older. In the 1990s, the Disney company began to define its identity in a different way. Sure, you probably saw films and went to the parks, but during your formative years, if you were born after 1985, the Disney company was trying to connect with you beyond screen media and parks. There was music, and by that I mean music beyond the soundtrack to movies. The company actively explored tween and teen culture, travel opportunities beyond theme parks, expanded consumer goods, and so on. To put this simply, for many years, likely through the 1990s and probably up until 2010, two different groups of Disney fans, depending on age, were having a significantly different experience with Disney products and Disney fandom. If you were born again before 1985, in your formative years, you likely learned that Disney's main products, film, parks, resorts, and some TV, were a way to temporarily leave your daily life as you escaped into a story or a place filled with wonder. That is, the world of Disney entertainment was outside the activities you did most days while at home. Lead Imagineer John Hench repeatedly defined the resorts as places where guests could wind down from the stress of their work and school lives and rejuvenate themselves before returning home. The Disney experience, largely for them, was arranged as a counterbalance to daily activities. However, if you were born after 1985 during your formative years, you likely learned that Disney's expanding list of products weren't so much a break from your regular life, but they were being heavily integrated into your day-to-day activities. This meant that many younger fans arranged Disney-related activities into their daily life, making Disney more of a lifestyle company than a peak experience entertainment company. Here's how this all breaks down. In 1991, the Disney company started the Disney Vacation Club timeshares, with the first resort being at Disney World. A few years later, it started its own cruise line. In the mid-1990s, it expanded out the Disney Channel to focus more on tweens and teens with original series, and the Disney Movie of the Week, or the DCOMs as they were known back then. Shows on the Disney Channel leaned into pop music. This started with the early 1990s version of the Mickey Mouse Club, which featured Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and Justin Timberlake, all of whom released records through non-Disney music companies. But realizing their error in all this, the Disney company soon released the next wave of Disney Channel crossover musical artists, such as Hilary Duff and Miley Cyrus, on in-house labels, starting with Buena Vista Records, but quickly shifting over to the more pop-centered and also Disney-owned Hollywood Records. In 1996, to capitalize on the growing music focus within the Disney Channel, the company launched Radio Disney, with music focused largely on tween and teen interests. To test the concept, Radio Disney began in just 4 markets: Atlanta, Birmingham, Minneapolis, and Salt Lake City. 6 months later, it added Seattle. Satisfied with the station's performance, it began a nationwide rollout in the second half of 1997. Within 2 years, Radio Disney had over 60 local stations. Beyond media, the company expanded out its line of merchandise through over 700 Disney stores and mail order. Even in the early 1990s, in the Disney Store, you could already buy some items beyond film and park souvenirs, such as a Mickey-themed waffle iron or Goofy-themed salt and pepper shakers. Then there were weddings. Though the first wedding was held in a park in 1991, in 1995, Disney opened the Wedding Pavilion at Disney World. More significantly, in 1996, Disney opened the Town of Celebration as a live-in lifestyle option about 3 miles away from the edge of the resort property. Even though Disney sold off its remaining sections of that town 8 years later, the town would still retain its overall new urbanism feel with a light sense of theming. In this, the 1990s were a period when Disney began the shift from an entertainment company where fans occasionally engaged Disney content through films, parks, and some TV offerings, to a lifestyle company where Disney presented daily opportunities for fans to engage its offerings through parks, films, expanded TV offerings, a cruise line, a timeshare, expanded range of retail offerings arranged through Disney stores and other outlets, a town, and radio stations. And these efforts were rolled out so that many of the lifestyle elements were initially pitched more to tweens and teens, who would then grow up under the lifestyle umbrella. If, let's say, in the early 2000s, you had a household of Disney fans, younger fans were having a very different experience with Disney than older fans. Younger fans were far more likely to be hooked into the Disney Channel offerings, such as Halloween Town, The Cheetah Girls, Even Stevens, Johnny Tsunami, Lizzie McGuire, Kim Possible, High School Musical, and so on. Younger fans were also more likely to be keyed into Disney-related pop music and Radio Disney, such as with Hilary Duff, Miley Cyrus, and a little later Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato, while at the same time, material arranged towards older fans was still mostly centered in resorts, films, and the cruise line, with an emphasis on entertainment being a departure from daily life. And then around 2010, for older fans, this all started to change. After Disney bought Marvel and Lucasfilm, as Disney then had the intellectual property to engage older fans on a far more regular basis. From this point forward, Disney would be far more of a lifestyle company for all ages. Kids growing up in the 1990s and early 2000s had been presented with Disney as a lifestyle company since they were very young. And a group of adult fans in the 2010s were then being lured into the lifestyle sphere with more mature offerings, particularly with Star Wars and Marvel. And then in 2009, Disney established the D23 fan club, which largely solidified the lifestyle element of Disney's identity, especially for superfans. But all of this brings us back to one of the underlying shifts in the company that leads to proposed, what we'll still call mini parks, or more accurately, regional experiences of the mid to late 1990s. As the company evolved toward a lifestyle identity, the mini parks, or more accurately, regional installations in the second half of the 1990s, also followed this trend. That floating theme park, discussed in our last episode, was mostly arranged to offer unique and occasional Disney entertainment to guests in port cities. Though Disney clearly considered repeatability of the floating theme park, they didn't believe that many guests would go more than twice. The mini parks and regional installations of the late 1990s were arranged as places that guests might visit many times a year, possibly monthly or even weekly. And that there is where we pick up our story today. So in the mid to late 1990s, Disney used mini parks, or again, more accurately, regional installations, largely to help shift its brand identity toward more of a lifestyle company, and also largely starting with those age groups that they were also courting on TV into this new lifestyle identity. Disney established a division called Disney Regional Entertainment to create a range of local experiences, which inside of Disney were umbrellaed under the industry-wide term Location-Based Entertainment, or LBE. When Walt considered small regional parks, it was to bring Disneyland-style entertainment to those far from Anaheim. But in the 1990s, when Michael Eisner considered small regional installations, it was more to move Disney-owned entertainment into the regular experiences of families in the cities where they lived. And it wouldn't be just one type of experience, but a range of experiences that eventually moved from kids up towards adults. For kids between 1 and 10, there would be Club Disney, with activities arranged for elementary school-aged children. This project would regionalize the type of play experiences for younger guests that the company had developed for its hotels, Epcot, Toontown, and various play areas now defunct at Disney MGM Studios. For now, just think of these as combination discovery museums, craft centers, and themed indoor playgrounds. For tweens, teens, and young adults, primarily there would be Disney Quest, an indoor attraction filled with interactive games and experiences. This project was a partial descendant of that floating theme park, which looked for ways to adapt theme park experiences into indoor spaces, relying heavily on computer-assisted attractions. For guests of all ages, there would be upper-end Disney stores such as in Manhattan. In terms of interior design, these looked somewhat like a theme park and were arranged with various themed rooms. Lastly, for adults, there would be the ESPN Zone with its first restaurant pub, opening in Baltimore in 1997. That is 1 year after Disney acquired ESPN through its purchase of Capital Cities ABC. This would follow the lead of the non-Disney-owned Planet Hollywood franchise, which opened its first restaurant in 1991. What Planet Hollywood was to general movie fans, the ESPN Zone would be to sports fans. We'll take a look at each of these one at a time and also explore some of the interesting things that Disney built there. The first entry here is Club Disney, which also follows directly out of the floating theme park project. The project would fall under that new division called Disney Regional Entertainment, overseen by Art Levitt, who previously had focused on special projects, which typically meant non-park entertainment at the resorts, such as Pleasure Island and the Disney Village Marketplace, which was a forerunner to Disney Springs. He also spent time as the CEO of Hard Rock Cafe. That is, his previous experience both at Disney and at Hard Rock was mostly focused on shopping, dining, club entertainment, and outdoor stage spaces, which was a good primer for regional entertainment offerings. For Club Disney, he also brought on board some designers such as Jan Circus, who had worked on that floating theme park project, allowing them to take what they'd learned on the international project that moved from region to region and apply that knowledge to regional indoor parks in North America. These clubs were designed to compete with Discovery museums, then growing in popularity with an emphasis on learning and collaborative play. They were specifically designed to serve people within a 30-mile radius of the Club Disney Center, as a place where children would play for 2 to 3 hours. The club would be able to accommodate up to 850 guests at a time. The 2 pilot Club Disney centers were opened in Thousand Oaks and West Covina, California, both close enough to the studio to be evaluated by Disney management and allowing the regional entertainment division to revise and expand the concept before building locations across the country. Like the 1960s incarnation of Walt's Mickey Mouse Club parks, the Club Disney facilities were targeted at children 10 and under and their parents and grandparents. But unlike Mickey Mouse Club parks, Club Disney's were play centers with computer zones, story areas, climbing equipment, a Winnie the Pooh village for preschoolers, a room filled with arcade games, a castle-themed indoor maze, an arts and craft area, a science-based discovery lab, a parent-child aerobics area, as well as a theater area where kids could dress up as Disney characters. The concept that guided many areas in Club Disney was to create activities that parents and children engaged together. For example, all of the games on club computers required participatory play, meaning that there was no single-player option. The original press release sent on November 7, 1996, announced that the first Club Disney would open in Thousand Oaks, California in 1997. It would be arranged in a nearly 25,000 square foot freestanding building with 4 themed areas and an emphasis on adventures, or programming that combined education with adventure. And again, that overall goal was to create centers where parents and children played together. The company believed that this venture would begin a new wave of Disney regional installments across America and leading then into other countries. The mission of our regional entertainment is to create new entertainment concepts for urban and suburban locations around the world, Art Levitt explained. Club Disney is the first, but there will be many more introduced in the near future. In 1998, with the 2 pilot clubs opened, the company revealed that it had plans to roll out over 100 similar clubs across the country. Each club would hold a maximum of 850 guests and would employ about 85 cast members, most of them part-time. Except for holidays and special occasions, Walk-around Disney characters would not be part of the experience, though all of the play areas and games were keyed to Disney themes. In the months that followed, Disney opened 2 clubs in Arizona, one in Chandler and the other in Glendale, and one in Lone Tree, Colorado, which is about 20 miles south of downtown Denver. All of the clubs had a dance area, a dress-up fashion stage, a 2-story climber with tubes and tunnels and a 30-foot spiral slide, a lab room for science experiments, an arts and crafts lounge, a computer area called the Mousepad, with games and approved websites arranged for young visitors, and a Disney-themed mirror maze. There was also an additional play area based on current films with props and costumes. When that first club opened in Thousand Oaks, this theater play area was themed to Hercules. At the end of the year, it was switched over to the Disney film Flubber starring Robin Williams, and the following summer it was changed out to Milan. Each club would also have private rooms for birthday parties. The clubs were reasonably successful. Inside testing concluded that the most popular areas were the climbing tubes and spiral slide, various arts and crafts opportunities, the area for cast member-led dance and games, and the stage where kids could dress up as their favorite characters. But the clubs were short-lived. Disney never opened them across the country, only in those 5 test markets. In 1999, with the Disney stock falling by over 17%, the company determined that it needed to halt expansion as they determined the clubs wouldn't meet their profit expectations. Leslie Ferraro, director of sales and marketing for the division, explained that the chain isn't losing money, but it didn't hit the mark. Art Levitt said, "In the past 2.5 years, we have tested the Club Disney concept in 5 distinct demographic locations. Although the concept has been a creative success and well received by our guests, we have concluded that a broad rollout of the clubs will not meet the company's return requirement for the capital that would be invested into the business." Another regional Disney chain that developed during this time were flagship Disney stores. A typical Disney store was, and there are still a few of these that exist, a single-room standalone retail outlet for toys, games, clothes, and other items. At one time, Disney operated 747 Disney stores. Now there are about 20. In the mid-1990s, Disney had plans to create mega stores with multiple floors, themed rooms, and large sets that would look like a cross between a Disney park and an upper-end department store. The most notable of these megastores was in Manhattan, which Disney defined as its flagship offering. This, too, was developed in conjunction between Disney's regional entertainment division and other areas at WDI. Again, this project onboarded various members of the defunct Floating Theme Park Project, including Jan Circus. About the placement of the Disney Megastore in New York, Circus said, "This location is among the most expensive blocks of real estate in the retail world. FAO Schwarz is 3 blocks away, Tiffany's is on the same block." The store would have 40,000 square feet arranged over 4 floors. The store would have a regional theme arranged as a Disney version of a grand old New York mansion that used to exist in this section of Fifth Avenue. Or to put it in terms of a Disney backstory, it would be the elegant old house where the Disney characters lived whenever they came to New York. Inside the house, various rooms would be called the Grand Salon, a garden conservatory, a game room, and the attic, which was the 4th story, where Disney displayed memorabilia from its past, such as animation cells that it offered for sale. The store's presentation would incorporate elements of set design and show stage offerings often included inside of Disney parks. It would also have slightly larger than life-size maquettes or statues of Disney characters such as Cruella de Vil and Alice in Wonderland. Disney believed that this megastore would be its calling card in New York, and at this time Disney had just started its efforts on Broadway and then only had one production, Beauty and the Beast at the Palace Theater. And so inside the company, the massive Disney store, again as Jan Circus put it, was believed to represent Disney in New York City. In the years that followed, the Disney Broadway shows, such as The Lion King, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and so on, would actually become Disney's true calling card in the big city, but it would take a few years before Disney theatrical productions began to saturate the live theater market. Inside the company, this shift was important as those theatrical productions became a significant source of revenue. Ultimately, the emphasis of Disney's brand in New York would be Broadway shows and not that megastore. The third regional development was Disney Quest. In the mid-1990s, Imagineering began to leverage the company's recent experience with computer animation, 3D presentations, and VR studio elements into park experiences. One early public presentation was an in-park offering of Aladdin's Magic Carpet as a high-flying VR adventure, which premiered in July 1994 at Epcot. After 15 months at Epcot, the presentation shifted over to Disneyland as part of the Starcade in Tomorrowland, where guests put on VR headsets and flew over the streets of Agrabah on Aladdin's carpet. This was one of the first regular public demonstrations of a VR experience that could be controlled by users. The in-park demonstrations also convinced Disney that they might find success with a collection of other computer-controlled and/or VR-assisted experiences, perhaps assembled into one futuristic arcade with game experiences far beyond what anyone could experience at home or even at the arcade chain Dave & Buster's. This concept evolved into Disney Quest. Though plans for Disney Quest had been in the works for a while, it finally opened in July 1998. Disney announced this as a breakthrough concept in family regional entertainment. The first location was in downtown Disney, or what is now Disney Springs at Disney World, next to the Cirque du Soleil Theater. It was arranged in a massive box of a building without windows to control the lighting inside. And there were plans to build more Disney Quest locations across America, with the first off-site Disney Quest being built then in Chicago. Beyond Chicago, Disney announced a future location in Philadelphia, where it would take over space recently abandoned by a defunct department store. Disneyland, and specifically the downtown Disney shopping corridor that was then under construction, was announced as the fourth location, with likely more beyond that. The hope was that Disney Quest would overcome the problems experienced with Club Disney. Disney Quest has a much broader appeal, said Leslie Ferraro. Club is for kids aged 1 to 10, whereas Quest is for all ages. It's a lot more interactive. To say that Disney Quest was for all ages might be a bit of an overstatement, but more on that in a second. The 5-story Disney Quest structure at Disney World featured a simulated roller coaster ride called Cyberspace Mountain, where guests powered past digital environments with the experience musically underscored by an electronica soundtrack. There was a virtual jungle cruise over a rough river where guests paddled their way through virtual water in a rubber boat situated before a giant screen. There was a room where, guided by a Disney artist, guests drew characters on a screen with a stylus. A VR experience where guests battled swords with animated villains, a futuristic bumper car experience, a long line of standard video games for what Disney then called the Nintendo generation, and of course that VR Aladdin's Magic Carpet ride that had previously been showcased in Epcot and then at Disneyland. The second Disney Quest opened the following June in downtown Chicago. But that is as far as the Disney Quest expansion got. The Chicago operation would close within 2 years, and beyond that, no others would be built. Again, Leslie Ferraro, that same spokesperson who once said that Club Disney wasn't losing money but wasn't hitting profit goals, said the exact same thing was true for the Chicago Disney Quest location. Well, people loved it, she said, but it was a test. Essentially, it was a test that didn't perform up to Disney's return on investment expectations. She never explained, though, if either Club Disney or Disney Quest was simply not losing money month to month based on operational costs, or if these regional offerings weren't losing money once you factored in development, design, equipment, and installation costs. I'm pretty sure it was the first option in that list. Lastly, there was a string of ESPN Zone pubs and restaurants. This was originally announced as the ESPN Grill Project in 1997, but the name was changed as the concept developed. This would be a large sports bar with a giant 16-foot screen, and additional 200 TV screens, and a sports memorabilia shop. The first one would be built in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, which was a tourist destination. It would be a restaurant capable of holding 600 guests. A second location was then planned for Chicago, right down the way from Disney Quest, and from there locations were built in Atlanta, New York, downtown Disney, Denver, Las Vegas, and elsewhere. In ways, the ESPN zones were the most successful of any proposed concept from Disney's regional entertainment division. I would suggest that the ESPN zones were the most successful because they were the least Disney, but more on that in a moment. In the early 2000s, the company examined why the two main regional-themed offerings weren't connecting with the public, specifically Club Disney and Disney Quest. At this point, Disney considered 3 possibilities. First, that the public was shifting away from computer-focused play. Second, that the public wouldn't support the price point for some of these regional activities, in terms of Disney reaching its profit goals considering the unique equipment that was installed in each location. In Chicago, for example, Disney Quest opened with a $36 entry fee, a price that was lowered a few months later to $24. Lastly, both Club Disney and Disney Quest were primarily focused on a relatively narrow age demographic. Club Disney was for elementary school-aged children. Disney Quest was largely for tweens, teens, and young adults. Neither offered many opportunities to engage the whole family. Grandpa, for example, likely was never getting on that virtual Space Mountain or working the oars on the virtual Jungle Cruise. Through the late 1990s and early 2000s, nearly all of the Disney regional entertainment offerings closed. All 5 Club Disneys were closed by November 1st, 1999. Disney Quest in Chicago closed during the summer of 2001, though that location at Disney World would struggle through to 2017, in part because to close it would leave a very large empty building in the middle of the old West End, or what has become more recently Disney Springs. The massive theme park like Disney Store in Manhattan closed in 2010 due to high rent, relocating as a far smaller and less ornate store in Times Square where it still exists. The last 2 ESPN sports bars closed in 2017 and 2022, namely the ESPN Zone at Disneyland and the ESPN Club at Disney World. One of the big questions here is, why weren't any of these successful long-term, or why wasn't the return on investment up to Disney's expectations? In ways, some of the regional Disney efforts were a victim of the company's earlier success with full theme parks. Guests expected Disney experiences to be spectacular and larger than life. They also expected them to continually have a feeling of freshness. On both these counts, Disney simply wasn't able to meet expectations. Though ESPN Zone and Disney Quest could be fascinating and engaging experiences on a first visit, they weren't updated often or in some cases at all. It was simply too costly. And over time, without regular new experiences, these regional installations felt more common than unique, even if Disney did update some offerings inside of Disney Quest occasionally. It's not that these regional offerings weren't a good idea, but rather by the mid-1990s, consumers had a different set of expectations for a Disney-related experience than they did for experiences produced by other companies. Simply, the gap between expectations and reality here was pretty large. All of these regional installations we talked about here today have now closed. The longest lasting again were the least Disney, that is the ESPN zones, perhaps because the people going there had the fewest expectations for a Disney-level experience. Many guests probably didn't even know that these large sports pubs were owned by Disney. After the early 2000s, the overall lifestyle impulse did live on inside the Disney company, though it migrated away from regional experiences. And to understand this, we first need to talk about the managerial priorities of Michael Eisner versus the managerial priorities of Bob Iger. As a CEO, Michael Eisner believed in developing out the parks in robust ways. Eisner greenlit and opened multiple parks and water parks. These included Hollywood Studios, Typhoon Lagoon, Animal Kingdom, Blizzard Beach, California Adventure, Tokyo Disney Sea, Euro Disneyland, the Walt Disney Studio Park in Paris, and Hong Kong Disneyland. In contrast, his successor, Bob Iger, over the last 20 years, has opened a grand total of just one new Disney park, which is Shanghai Disneyland. Under Iger's direction, the company's lifestyle expansion has been focused more on film and screen elements and consumer products. His idea for regular Disney engagement of a fan base is not to visit a Club Disney or a Disney Quest or even an ESPN zone, but rather to click on Disney Plus or ABC to find shows that relate to the core Disney experience and values, including animation offerings for younger fans, pop culture films for tweens and teen fans like Club Rock, Descendants, or the Zombies franchise, and Marvel and Star Wars offerings for older fans, along with films such as Moana and Encanto designed for the entire family. He also leaned far more into consumer products. During the Eisner era, most Disney products had either an image of a Disney character, a park icon, or a Disney logo on it. Eisner focused IP on the consumer products while letting the parks produce some non-Disney IP experiences, such as cooking demonstrations, classes about art, the original Norway ride without Frozen, nearly every attraction at Animal Kingdom, including Kilimanjaro Safari, Expedition Everest, and Kali River Rapids, the Pleasure Island Complex, and nearly every opening day attraction at California Adventure, including Soaring Over California, Mulholland Madness, the Golden Dreams film, and Grizzly River Run. Iger's approach has been the exact opposite. Nearly all of the additions to the parks under Iger have been focused on movie IP. He even remade some Eisner-era attractions by infusing them with film characters such as Frozen Ever After. But he allowed consumer products to move away from IP-only offerings. Sure, there's still Disney character plush and Disney character t-shirts and so on. But under Iger, a range of consumer goods have a far more subtle and at times nearly invisible connection to Disney. Under Iger, you could find dresses or other clothes inspired by Snow White, for example, but without any characters on them. These items simply reused the color palette from the 1937 presentation of the character. You could buy office furniture, such as lamps and chairs, that had the mid-century design feel of items once in Walt Disney's own office. You could buy a cross-branded Disney Tommy Bahama Hawaiian shirt where the Disney element was simply a 1-inch Mickey silhouette stitched only once into the shirt's bottom hem. There were entire cosmetic lines that featured color arrangements similar to the dominant color themes in classic animated films such as Sleeping Beauty and Alice in Wonderland. Also, there was a Disney cross-branded perfume line. A person during this period could buy table lamps similar to those in a Disney hotel room such as the Poly or ones that look vaguely like the water tower at the Disney studio. They could also buy soaps and shampoos with their signature scents identical to those in Disney hotels, just as some Eisner-era attractions and shows gestured lightly to Disney IP, some Iger-era consumer offerings also gestured lightly to IP as a way of increasing the company's consumer goods footprint beyond those consumers who wanted to wear a character t-shirt or have a character image dominantly displayed in their home. In this, Disney moved even more into high-end offerings by developing products with companies like Dolce & Gabbana. There was even an outdoor bar inspired by Disney's Animal Kingdom. Again, no characters, just an underlying design vibe. There was jewelry loosely inspired by Disney film classics, again without characters, that professional women could wear to work. There were even Disney-branded prom dresses from Glitterati. No Disney characters, just the general design feel of certain animated characters, which allowed those wearing them to feel a subtle and quiet connection to Disney without projecting a full-blown advertisement for it. And simply here as a side note, I'm guessing that this is one of the reasons why some older commentators don't always understand the Disney adult phenomenon that is largely focused on those under the age of 40, as older commentators were first introduced to Disney when they were focused on escapist entertainment, which is very different from how younger fans first experienced Disney when they were growing up. But that's an entirely different topic. The topic for today is this last wave of regional installations, or what might be described as the descendants of those mini parks, all of which have now closed. In terms of experiences over the last 2 decades, Disney has shifted back to large peak adventures as the center of their experiences division, rather than regional offerings that fans might experience monthly or even weekly. The center of Disney experiences is again the parks and resorts, as well as the cruise line and Adventures by Disney, as well as a few off-site Disney hotels such as Aulani and the DVC Hilton Head Island Resort in South Carolina. Another type of Disney offerings has also been funneled into D23, which mostly presents occasional experiences like the D23 Expo and various live programs and trips. And beyond this, the location for most of those regional Disney installations was in a downtown center of American cities. But simply, those centers are no longer the gathering places that they once were 20 or 30 years ago. In a world of relatively inexpensive airfare and fragmented downtown communities, it's probably a stronger plan for Disney to focus its capital investments in expanding large resorts rather than establishing smaller regional offerings elsewhere. But in all this, I find it interesting to think about what might have been if some of these mini parks had taken root, such as the themed villages at the Disney Studios in 1939, or the satellite Fantasyland-style mini parks across America, or that Disney co-sponsored museum park in Monterey, or Walt's version of a California-themed park in Anaheim, or even the SS Disney floating theme park. If some of those had taken off, it might have opened the door for a wider range of successful regional experiences in the 1990s and beyond. But instead, the public's perception of a Disney experience aligned with a grand vacation, such as in Orlando or to Paris or on the Disney Cruise Line, making it nearly impossible for any regional experience to meet such expectations that Disney has now set for itself. But in recent years, there has been a move to reinvigorate regional movie-related themed offerings, only Disney is not presently part of that conversation. Disney is simply leaving that discussion to other themed entertainment companies. I'll be back next week with a new episode, and the plan, at least right now, is to move through a number of news stories next week, and then beyond that, to get back into things that relate to history. Lastly, as you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just two things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and the parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions, specifically by listeners who join us over on Bandcamp as monthly subscribers. On Bandcamp, you will find over 300 episodes not available on iTunes or anywhere else. But the best reason to join us there is to support the work we do here and to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can support us by becoming a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in our show notes. So, until next Sunday, this is Todd James Pierce.